What oftentimes is about thinking of more variables, and it's understanding draft better, it's understanding your champion better, understanding where to be on the map better, and coordinating better.
This is Zento from Esports Heaven, and I have here with me Isles from Dignitas. Unfortunately, a loss to 100 Thieves. I know most people are going to be asking, like, was this a draft diff?
I think, for the most part, it was a gameplay problem. I think there were several things in the game that might have been nuanced at times, and there were several, probably more obvious issues, but I would say yesterday, for example, in the game we played against Cloud9, the game was played better by us, but the draft was definitely difficult. Obviously, there were definitely times where we could have played better, but today it felt to me like there were so many opportunities that we had to play better, but the draft was like not really in my head at all during the game. It seemed like it was completely playable. We had so many opportunities. Like at sometimes we had, just two winning lanes, and then our bot lane was like weaker, but our jungle was like way stronger during the early game, for example. And I think we just misallocated our resources and didn't fight as well as we could have.
So I want to talk about your solo queue antics. I believe you had 3 challenger accounts, right, in top 10?
Yeah, for the past two splits actually, both the previous season, like previous split and this split, I had 3 accounts in top 10s at several times. I think that, I mean, it's probably not a secret to many people that if you're familiar with high elo, I'm just good at solo queue, and it was due to like personal stuff. Like I wasn't able to play for a long time, but this was like my outlet to show my skill. I was streaming fairly consistently, and I was just playing solo queue. So
It's
you'd
like
expect.
your giant billboard, basically.
Yeah. It's a good way of advertising myself. So I was doing my best in solo queue, but yeah, I mean, I just sort of have the process down in solo queue for winning games. I think like, that never give up mindset, or like that, long run sort of just general game plan when it goes into each game. Yeah, it's not like I'm far from the person that tilts after one game. I just keep playing my game, keep doing what's right each game, and obviously it worked out for me in solo queue. But
So I've noticed when playing my solo queue game, so I just recently hit Masters, and I play support too, but I only play one champion, Nautilus. But I've noticed that it seems like you can win a lot of games just through not tilting and not having your teammates tilt. Is that like the secret to get up in top 10, or?
I think that obviously, the higher you go, the more small elements sort of have to be present in your game in order to be, that next level player. I think support, it's no secret that mechanically support is less intensive, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily easier. And, what separates a good support from, a support that's, not as good might just be more variables. If, like, for example, I might be thinking of, how many wards, like a good example I've taught people before, is if you hit tab and you look how many wards the enemy support has used in a recent amount of time, you can kind of figure out where they've warded if you've seen them ward, And if every small thing that's present in the game, if I'm thinking about it and you're not, over one game, you might beat me and I might lose, but if we play 10 games against each other, maybe I'll beat you 8 out of 10, And it's these small variables and this long run sort of mentality that gives me the edge over other supports, and just I don't know, the edge over other players in general, I think.
So what do you think the major differences seems to be from pro play to solo queue as specifically a support? Like, what do you think the large differences are that you have to make, as yourself as you're playing these games versus solo queue, and maybe your tendencies there?
There are definitely bad habits people can pick up from solo queue, because I think competitive is a completely different world. People will play laning phase and they'll play matchups and champions to make laning phase usually, especially on stage where people are very scared, very uninteractive. And in certain drafts and certain playstyles, and you're going to have to start learning to use your resources and utilize your opportunities where your champions are stronger. But if you play in solo queue, for example, it's not like people are going to exploit every single moment where their champ is stronger than yours, They're just going to, randomly tilt and die to a gank,
Yeah.
And that's the biggest difference, I think, is that some of the really, really good players out there, every time they have an opportunity to, make a play, whether it be walk in enemy jungle, get vision, or utilize some sort of lane trade dynamic, or utilize a slight bit of mid priority, that champ might have. All of these tiny things come into play, and it becomes so much less about, especially in modern League of Legends, about your individual skill and more about your team cohesiveness and your team members and yourselves, like understanding of how each champion in the game functions and then how to play accordingly. It's just monumentally different from solo queue because everyone is, has such a deep understanding of their champion and everyone is coordinating in comms too. It's another thing. Communication is so important. It's because coordination is everything in League, in competitive, It's, making the right play at the right time, deciding to make a decision that might be slightly worse for you individually that is holistically much better for the game, You don't see opportunities like this when you play solo oftentimes, and
It's almost a different game, right?
it's largely different.
Yeah.
I think it's, for example, especially in support, it's hard to show individual skills sometimes, but the individual skill might come out of game, You can be telling your teammates, this is what we should do, and then this planning element that you can't see maybe through gameplay, especially individually, but it can happen holistically inside of, the competitive environment. You might see many games, like how players perform and how they move around the map with their jungler, or how they, influence their team just through talking, So it's very, very multifaceted, but...
So, what are your opinions on the support meta currently? Because I know we're seeing maybe a little engaged supports. We're not really seeing a ton of enchanters other than Milio. And we're seeing, of course, the ADC supports. So, what's your just overall general opinion of the support meta right now?
I think in the past maybe 2 or 3 years, one of the things that's happened to bot lane is that oftentimes it's more important to pick a duo that has good synergy rather than to counterpick individual parts of bot lane. So for the greatest examples that come to head immediately are champs like Kalista Renata and champs like Lucian Nami or Lucian Melia. Although these champions, might have individual matchups that are bad, for example, Lucian historically was weak against champs like Draven and Kalista, when paired with these other champs that enhance their champions or allow more opportunities, these champions can suddenly beat matchups that they couldn't before. And oftentimes the matchups they can either neutralize or have advantages or, have scaling elements that are strong too. So for example, in the game we played against C9 yesterday, I think they had a great idea of what they wanted to do, where they drafted Kalista Renata plus Orianna Nocturne and even Rumble. All parts of their comp were synergistic in the way that they picked a strong duo bot lane that was, although you could have come up with maybe some fringe matchup that could beat it, but it's generally very strong, performs very similarly throughout its games, and when paired with these other champs in the game, they have that one-bro synergy, They always have that ability to pressure early, stave off early ganks, as well as have that Renata ult to layer over, the Orianna Nocturne ult, and the Nocturne also complements that engage angle that it might give you by turning off the lights, So when it comes to the meta overall, I think that oftentimes nowadays it is just about picking strong combos. And there are definitely champs that stick out, and on the strong combos conversation, it also kind of is reflected in mid-jungle too.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can forego, like I said, creating this bot lane combo when certain champions are banned, and you can create a mid-jungle combo. Something they do in the LCK pretty often is like Rel Orianna as well. They could go with Nico Nocturne. They could come up with some combination that is really strong as a duo. Usually it's mid-jungle or AD sup. Previously, and last season when Rift Herald was very important in the early game, people would oftentimes pick stuff like Jax Sejuani or Aatrox Sejuani, and this was a top jungle combo that's really strong lately. But yeah, League in these 2 seasons, maybe plus 3 seasons, has been very combo centric in that state. So that's probably why you see certain champions are picked in a way that might seem confusing. And when you see stuff like Nautilus come out, it's usually because lots of champions start to get banned. The strong combos are like, the Lucian stuff, Kalista Renata, sometimes Kalista Senna is very popular on China, for example. And that's why usually you see the same couple champs banned every time. It's always Ashe, Kalista, Varus, and Lucian. These are like the 4 popular ADCs. And you'll see, if you're going to get support bans, it's always either Renata, Emilio, Ashe, something like this. So
See, so I'm looking at the support picks, and I'm wondering, just this kind of nebulous idea, and I guess it points back to your comment earlier about mechanics and supports. There's not really a lot of support picks where you can express your mechanical prowess, right? There's like Thresh. That's really about it, like that's the only thing that people it comes to mind with when people talk about mechanics for supports. I presented this question to Stunt before, and I asked him, do supports need mechanics? And he's like, I mean, it's nice, but there's a player like Busio. Everyone says Busio has great mechanics, and I think it's because he plays a lot of mid lane champions in solo queue as well, but that allows him to express his mechanics. So how do you feel as a support and trying to express your mechanics? Do you feel like maybe there's not enough? Do you feel like even supports need mechanics necessarily?
I think that great support players, especially Asian players, like I could easily list examples of players that are just fantastic mechanically and also are fantastic role players. But there are also players that are fantastic mechanically that are awful role players. And just the nature of the role does entail that there are players that are worse mechanically that are better than players that are better mechanically because, like I said, support oftentimes is about thinking of more variables. And it's understanding draft better, it's understanding your champion better, understanding where to be on the map better, and coordinating better. Like, these are generally more important skills, but that doesn't mean that mechanics aren't important. Like I said, if I were to list really good sub players, obviously the ones come to mind, Carrier, Lehens, Chinese supports like On and Missing. These supports are all fantastic mechanically, and even though, especially in China, they might only play like every game you see Renata, Rakan, Nautilus, but these players have perfected these champions, and some of them are like, there was a game that BLG played the other day where On was playing Ashe, and you can see how fantastic he is at pushing his limits. He's so precise with his movements, and he's like, he's got that cocky sort of movement that really infuriates players. So I think, sometimes you don't always get that chance to show your flair or show your ability, but, when you play competitive, it's not always about being flashy, and oftentimes that's players' downfalls. So that's sort of where I stand on it. Like, I know, the time will come where you get to look cool, but, at the end of the day, winning is what matters, not looking cool.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, I am looking for a win for Dignitas next week, so appreciate it very much, Isles. This has been Azento from Esports Heaven and Isles from Dignitas. Thank you.